At first glance, a nation's influence might seem defined by the size of its economy, the strength of its military, or the reach of its diplomacy. Yet, the true endurance of a state is rarely measured in tanks, trade, or treaties alone. Instead, it emerges from the deliberate moral and ethical choices embedded within its institutions, its leadership, and the collective psyche of its citizens. These choices, often invisible to outsiders, ripple through society, shaping political legitimacy, social trust, and national cohesion across generations. Today, we'll examine the hidden ethical frameworks that allows some nations to withstand crises, maintain moral authority, and cultivate resilience where others falter. Welcome to Nations and Notions. I'm Professor Elias Hawthorne, and together we'll explore how values, ethics, and collective morality shape the fate of nations. Prepare to see the world in ways we rarely consider, through the lens of shared responsibility, ethical governance, and national psychology. The ethical foundations of Scandinavian societies. When we look at Scandinavian nations, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, we often marvel at their prosperity, high living standards, and civic stability. Yet beneath these visible achievements lies a far deeper foundation, a moral philosophy ingrained into both governance and everyday behavior. Consider the Law of Jante, or Janteloven, which originated in Denmark but resonates across the Nordic region. To outsiders, it can appear restrictive, a suppression of individuality. But at its core, it codifies a collective ethic. No one is inherently above the community. Everyone has a duty to contribute. Societal cohesion is a moral obligation. This principle isn't enforced by force or law alone. It is internalized over generations, shaping behavior through shared understanding rather than coercion. History reinforced these norms. Harsh climates, scarce resources, and regional conflicts taught communities that survival depended on trust, cooperation, and ethical decision-making. Social cohesion became a moral imperative, and this collective ethic was etched into the national psyche. Even education reflects this philosophy. From a young age, children are taught empathy, fairness, and cooperation as core values. Playgrounds, schools, and community spaces aren't just functional. They are designed to encourage shared responsibility, to reinforce the internalization of ethics as everyday habit. By the time citizens enter adulthood, moral responsibility isn't an abstract ideal. It's lived practice. Ethical governance as national resilience. Scandinavia's social success extends far beyond culture. It is institutionalized. Consider Norway's management of its oil wealth. Unlike many resource-rich nations that fall prey to short-term political gain or elite enrichment, Norway channels its oil revenues into the government pension fund. This fund operates on principles of sustainability, fairness, and societal benefit. Ethical decision-making isn't an afterthought. It's codified into the structures of governance, reinforcing trust and legitimacy. Sweden's welfare system provides a parallel. Here, equality isn't simply a legal requirement. It's a moral imperative internalized by citizens. Voluntary compliance with social norms isn't enforced through fear of punishment, but through recognition that fairness and solidarity are core to the collective good. Ethical governance aligns policy, psychology, and public behavior, creating institutions that are not only functional, but resilient. Even during crises, these ethical frameworks shine. Take the COVID-19 pandemic. Sweden heavily relied on voluntary compliance and collective responsibility. Citizens followed guidance not solely out of fear of fines, but because adherence was a moral commitment to the community. Norway's long-term environmental and social policies reveal a similar foresight. Ethics guiding strategy, enabling societies to anticipate and manage crises proactively. This is national psychology in action, a population whose internalized ethics amplify resilience. A society where moral responsibility is embedded into everyday life doesn't just endure challenges, it navigates them with calm, coordination, and foresight. Lessons from history. Ethics in action. Historical examples further illustrate this principle. During World War II, Danish and Norwegian citizens famously helped rescue Jewish neighbors, often at personal risk. They weren't acting under legal obligation or bureaucratic oversight. They were responding to deeply ingrained ethical principles. Trust, fairness, and solidarity were more than ideals. They were moral imperatives embedded into the culture. These principles carried forward into post-war recovery and governance. Social cohesion, reinforced by shared moral values, allowed societies to rebuild more effectively than many others torn apart by conflict. Scandinavia's ability to recover, maintain legitimacy, and foster trust was not merely a product of wealth or external aid. It was the outcome of a national moral infrastructure. Even in peacetime, these lessons manifest subtly. Urban planning, parental leave policies, and workplace equality all reflect ethical foresight in action. Citizens experience fairness and solidarity daily, and these lived experiences reinforce societal resilience. It is a cycle. Moral governance informs citizen behavior, and citizen behavior validates governance. The psychology of collective morality. To understand this dynamic, we must examine the psychology underpinning societal resilience. National psychology is not an abstract concept. It is the internalized ethics and values of a population. In Scandinavia, moral leadership creates a feedback loop. When leaders consistently demonstrate ethical decision-making, citizens internalize these principles. Institutions function with integrity, and corrective behavior strengthens societal cohesion. This explains why Scandinavian nations consistently rank among the world's highest for transparency, civic engagement, and social trust. These aren't just statistics. They reflect generations of deliberate moral cultivation. Crises are navigated with strategy and cooperation, not merely compliance, because citizens and institutions share a foundational moral alignment. In other words, prosperity alone cannot explain resilience. Military power, natural resources, or economic output may influence a nation's external reach, but internal cohesion, the ethical and moral glue holding society together, defines how a nation responds to adversity.
Contemporary reflections and global relevance. Scandinavia's experience provides lessons that extend far beyond Northern Europe. Ethical governance, moral leadership, and internalized societal values are central to any nation seeking lasting success. The question isn't merely, can we build wealth, or can we defend ourselves? It's, can we cultivate trust, solidarity, and moral legitimacy? Modern crises, pandemics, climate change, migration challenges, test nations in ways reminiscent of historical adversity. Countries with strong ethical frameworks, ingrained societal norms, and leaders who embody moral responsibility navigate these challenges with far greater resilience. Consider Norway's environmental policies. Long-term planning, social equity, and ethical foresight ensure the nation adapts proactively rather than reactively. Sweden's social systems continue to demonstrate that voluntary compliance, underpinned by shared values, is far more effective than coercion. These are contemporary proofs of what generations of Scandinavian communities have internalized. Ethical behavior isn't idealistic, it's practical, effective, and enduring. As we reflect, we see that the power of a nation is never solely about material assets, military might, or economic dominance. It is rooted in the moral choices it makes, the systems it builds, and the ethical norms it cultivates. Scandinavian societies remind us that trust, cooperation, and collective responsibility are not abstract ideals. They are instruments of national resilience, legitimacy, and prosperity. For policymakers, leaders, and citizens alike, there are lessons here. Cultivate ethical leadership, reinforce shared values, and embed moral responsibility into the fabric of society. These steps aren't abstract exercises in philosophy. They are foundational for long-term stability, crisis management, and societal cohesion. Even for those outside Scandinavia, the insight is universal. Nations may rise and fall based on choices that are invisible at first glance. The ethical calibration of institutions, the moral example set by leaders, and the everyday internalization of responsibility by citizens. When these elements align, societies don't just survive, they flourish. A moral architecture for the future. As we conclude, it's clear that morality is not peripheral to national success. It is central. Scandinavian societies endure because they have cultivated shared ethical values, reinforced these through governance, and embedded moral responsibility into the collective psyche. The lesson extends to all nations. Prosperity is fragile without ethics. Authority is hollow without moral legitimacy. And resilience is impossible without trust. Our examination today reveals that the hidden architectures of morality, governance, and culture define not only the present, but the long-term fate of societies. For those of us observing from the outside, the question remains, what moral principles are we willing to uphold today to ensure the strength, cohesion, and legitimacy of the nations of tomorrow? This is the challenge and the promise of understanding national psychology through the lens of ethics and morality. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the hidden ethics behind Scandinavian social success. I'm Professor Elias Hawthorne, and this has been Nations and Notions, where global morals meet modern realities. If you want to explore the world in ways you've never considered before, the psychology, the ethics, and the hidden forces shaping nations, subscribe to the channel and join our journey of understanding.